everyone, I'm Jen, a programming librarian at the Cedar Rapids Public Library. Today we are going to be creating a trendy little tapestry. You may have seen these in some boutique shops around town or on Pinterest. This craft will take you about 3 to 4 hours, so you may need to put it down and come back to it. For this craft, you should have one 6-inch wooden dowel, one cardboard loom, one plastic needle, 2 pieces of cotton thread, and a variety of yarns at different lengths. Take your cotton thread that is 216 inches long and create a loop at one end. Slip the loop over the first tooth on your cardboard loom. Thread the string between the teeth on your cardboard loom, going back and forth. There should be 10 teeth between your first loop and your last. Finally, create another loop like we did when we first started putting together our loom on the last tooth. In your materials, you should have received 10 32-inch teal cotton threads. Fold your cotton thread in half and slip the loop end under the second piece of cotton thread on your loom. Tuck the loop again underneath that second piece of thread on your loom to create a loop on one side with your ends on the other. Pull your ends through the loop and pull as tightly as you can and bring it down behind the tooth of the loom. We've just created a tassel. Move along the loom, making sure that you're inserting your teal thread on the right-hand side of each of the loops that you're creating a tassel for. Stop before getting to the last loop. To start, you're going to fold your teal string in half, and then you're going to fold it in half again. On the right side should be a loop, and on the other side there should be a loop and then 2 separate ends. Push the looped end of your teal thread through the hole of the loop that's attached to your loom. Then you're going to pull the ends through that loop and pull the ends tightly and down and around to create the tassel. Next, using the skewer that was provided for you in your materials, you're going to thread it every other one through the warp or the cotton that is on your weaving loom. We are essentially using this skewer as a shed stick. After we have it threaded through, we can then begin weaving. Grab one piece of the golden fluffy thread made out of cotton t-shirts. Begin by threading one of the ends under the warp and then over the second piece of warp. This should be fairly easy since we have our shed stick woven through our warp. Gently pull the yellow thread through the loom, making sure that our strings don't get caught in the thick pile of this fiber. Leave about 1.5 inches of thread on the left-hand side of the loom and gently pull it down to the very bottom where our tassels are. Straighten the fiber of the golden thread through the warp just to even out the loom again. Next, with the other end of our golden thread, we'll pull it through the second piece of warp on the right-hand side of our loom. We want to make sure that we're not pulling too tightly and that we're also getting that little tail wrapped up appropriately so that we don't see it sticking out when we're all finished. Next, we're going over the third piece of warp and then under the fourth. So essentially we're going over all of the odd numbered pieces of warp and under all the even pieces of warp on the loom. Continue going over and then under, weaving through your loom until you get to the left-hand side. Leave the end as it is once you get to the left-hand side of the loom and straighten your fiber. Thread the white yarn onto your plastic needle. We will start weaving with the needle by first going over and then under, over then under all the way through our warp. When we get to the other side, we're going to gently pull our yarn almost all the way through until we have just a very small end on the left-hand side of our loom. Using our needle, we'll poke down the yarn before we start the weaving process again. This time we'll start on the right-hand side of the loom, and we're going to start by going under, over, under, and over. This should be fairly easy, again, because our shed stick has been woven through our warp. Gently pull the yarn through. Make sure not to pull it too tightly on the end, otherwise it'll pull your warp against itself. Make sure that your end from your warp is threaded through your yarn so that it won't show through when we finish with our tapestry. Pull your yarn down so that it's against the golden thread that we used before. You can even use the end of your needle to push that even closer, or use our shed stick to do the same thing. You'll continue weaving. We'll start on the left-hand side this time, going over and then under, over then under to the right-hand side. And then we'll gently pull our yarn through and then push it down against the golden thread and begin from under and then over, under then over on the right-hand side. Continue weaving until you have about 2.5 inches to 3 inches of white yarn on your loom. Leave about a 2.5 inch tail. Next, we're going to make a tassel row. Gather together 3 pieces of teal cotton thread. Thread the 3 pieces of string underneath the second and third cotton threads of the warp. Make sure the strings are even on both sides. Next, pull the teal thread through the center of the second and third strings of the warp. This will create a loop. Feed the right ends of the teal thread through the loop, and do the same with the left-hand side. Gently pull both ends, creating a tassel. Repeat these steps along the warp, spreading out the tassels evenly. Thread the needle with our cotton yarn. Starting on the left-hand side of the loom, we're going to thread our needle over, under across our loom. Gently pull your thread through your loom, leaving a 1.5 to 2 inch tail. From the right-hand side, we're going to thread our needle going under, over till we get to the right-hand side. Straighten your thread with your needle and pull it close to the tassels. Continue weaving, creating a 1/2 inch layer of teal thread on your loom. For our next row in the tapestry, I'm going to teach you how to do a sumac stitch. Thread your gray fiber under the first piece of warp on your loom on the left-hand side. Wrap the fiber around the first 2 threads of the warp. Next, gather the second and third warp pieces and wrap your gray fiber around those and pull gently through. Continue this process across your loom until you get to the other side. Do not trim the fiber. We will tie it off after we've finished our tapestry. To complete the final rows of our weaving, we are going to repeat some of the techniques that we used earlier. Weave your gold thread through your loom first by going over, then under, then over, then under the warp of the loom. Leave an 1.5 to 2 inch tail on the left-hand side of the loom. To complete the second row of weaving, take the end on the right-hand side and weave going under, over, under, over. Leave a tail, we will tie it off later. Straighten the gold thread through the warp just to make sure we've aligned everything properly. For our next row in the tapestry, thread the white yarn onto our needle. Start weaving by pushing your needle over then under the warp pieces of your loom. Pull your yarn until you have a tail of about 1.5 to 2 inches. Thread your needle using the end of the yarn on the right-hand side of your loom. Start your second row of weaving by pushing your needle under then over the warp pieces of the loom. Gently pull your yarn through and continue weaving back and forth across the loom. Continue weaving until you have about 1 inch of white yarn on your tapestry. For final rows in our weaving, we'll be using the sumac stitch again. Thread your needle with the final piece of teal cotton thread. Slip the end of your yarn underneath the first rung of warp. Next, thread your needle under the first 2 pieces of warp and pull gently. After creating your first stitch, you'll thread your needle behind the second and third pieces of warp on your loom. Pull your yarn gently, creating the second stitch. You'll continue this process across the loom till you get to the right-hand side. Thread your needle under the last piece of cotton warp and pull gently. Then thread your needle under the second piece of warp on the right-hand side and pull to make our first stitch. Next, thread your needle under the second and third pieces of warp on the right-hand side of the loom. Continue this stitch back and forth across your loom until you have about 1/2 inch of teal thread at the top of your tapestry. Finally, we're ready to tie off all our ends of our tapestry. Create a knot right against the warp of the loom. Thread your needle with the end of the yarn and gently push it through the body of your tapestry. Once the yarn is through, cut the end flush against the tapestry and pull gently so that the thread disappears. Trim the tassels in the center of your tapestry. Trim your bottom tassels with a pair of scissors. Using a pair of scissors, cut the first 2 pieces of warp near the top of the loom. Tie the 2 ends together with a knot. Continue this process across the loom until the entire tapestry has been secured. Gently pull your tapestry off the loom. Thread your dowel between the cotton warp knots and your row of teal yarn. Once your dowel is through, use a pair of scissors and trim the ends of the knots. To create a hanger, use the remaining cotton thread and tie it around one side of the dowel. Using a simple knot, tie the other end of your cotton thread to your dowel. Using a pair of scissors, trim the ends. And we're finished! Here are some recommended books to check out from the library if you're interested in doing more weaving. Welcome to Weaving, the Modern Guide by Lindsay Campbell. There are several fun and modern projects in this book for you to enjoy. There are more tapestries than any of the other books I'm recommending. Campbell uses a variety of techniques focusing on beginner and intermediate level weavers. Weaving on the Little Loom by Fiona Daly. This provides more fun projects and patterns similar to the tapestry we created today. It also has great information for beginners, including information on fibers and tools. Thank you for watching, and don't forget to check out the other great programs the library offers, either on our Facebook page or YouTube channel, or by checking out the events calendar at crlibrary.org.